Greetings and welcome back to another video on my sort of second channel. My first channel is mostly Gwent related content, but I don't know if I'm going to start vlogging, or I might even put that here, but I want to sort of expand sort of the types of content I do related to video games. Right now I'm doing a Final Fantasy 12 playthrough all the way to Yazmat, and I'll probably stick to that as my only playthrough project for the time being, while I do sort of these extra projects on the side. So this one is my second tier ranking video. The last one I did, I tier ranked Radiata Stories characters, and honestly that was a long video. I feel like I shouldn't have done that many characters at once. Maybe if I had categorized it, it might have been better. So that's exactly what I did here, and today I will be ranking the Final Fantasy X bosses tier list. So I went ahead and looked for a list that had all of the Final Fantasy X bosses. I think, like, I'm trying to run back in my head sort of the entire playthrough to see if there are any bosses missing. As you guys can see, the Dark Aeons and Pendants are missing, and same with the Omega and Ultima weapon. These are just storyline characters, which honestly are like, you know, it's not, I mean, that's what I was going for anyway. I was just going for the storyline characters, because let's be honest, if the Dark Aeons and Pendants came up, or even the Ultima, actually no, not Ultimate Omega weapon, but if the post storyline bosses showed up, I would have them at S tier. I mean, that's kind of obvious at this point. So this is just all gonna be storyline bosses, and the way I'm going to rank them is based on how difficult they were at the time that I faced them. So obviously, if I didn't put it like that, I'd put like freaking like whatever the hard, like let's say for example like Sin, I'd probably put Sin like a rank S tier, because like, oh, he's way stronger than Seymour, or he's way stronger than Sin's Finn. Obviously he's way stronger than Evray, you know, but that's not how I'm doing it. The way I'm doing it is I'm ranking them by difficulty at the time that we faced them. Now, my apologies, I'm not going to remember all the names of these enemies, but I am going to remember, I will definitely remember when I faced them during the game. I'm not really good with names for the time being, but you know what? Hopefully we'll get better. Anyway, let's get going with the first enemy. This one is, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I think it's like Geosgaeno or something like that. This is the very first enemy you take on at the Baj Temple. So, well, you know, minus the stuff that happened in Zanarkand. Like, this is the actual first boss fight that you take on. And honestly, he is not easy. Not even his post-game version is actually easy. He's actually super difficult, because the thing is, if he petrifies one of your characters, they're dead. Like, there's nothing you can do about it. Now, I can't really judge him based on the... This is one of those exceptions where I kind of have to make it so that I have to judge him based on the battle at Baj Temple before the start of the storyline in Besaid, and after the game's finished, or like towards the end of the game where you actually get to fight him before you obtain anima. So because of how difficult, I actually found him pretty difficult, I gotta put him at the A rank. He was actually very difficult to defeat. Like, he had a pretty strong defense, and you were only limited to using your swimmers, which were Riku, Waka, and Titus. So and there's gonna be debate about that. I call it Titus, as that's just what I've been calling him. So you know what, whatever. Next we have Sinspawn. This is a Sinspawn, the octopus. Now you take him on after you defeat Sin's Finn. Now at the time of this fight, you only have Titus and Waka, so, and they're not that developed obviously, because you only finished Besaid. This thing has 2,000 health, I believe the same as Sin's Finn. But the thing is, this guy summons little Sinspawn scales, like the scales that but they're in their sort of scale form, because you know they don't actually develop the old insect thing because they're underwater. So he wasn't too easy of a boss, but he's definitely not as hard as him. So I'd probably put him like high C tier. I put him in the high C tier. He wasn't too easy, but he wasn't too difficult. But again, at the stage that you take him on with Titus and Waka, then yeah, he still was a pretty average boss to take on. Now this is the, if I recall correctly, this is the Oshu from the Kilika forest. So that Oshu, actually, if you take him on at that time, he is actually really difficult. That poison will actually just devastate you. Now, of course, it gets much easier once you obtain Ifrit, but, you know, if you try and take on the Oshu before you even get Ifrit, then you're actually gonna have a hard time, just because that poison will damage you, and not to mention he has Oshu Dance and he has Earthquake. So I'm actually putting him in the B tier because of that. At the time you take him on, if you don't have Ifrit, you're going to have a hard time. Next, we have another Sinspawn. This Sinspawn we took it on at, I think, one of, like, at the between the forest and the Kilika temple. You take him on sort of in between there, sort of one of the remnants of Sin after he attacked Kilika. I guess he left one of his Sin spawn there. This one actually wasn't as hard as Oshu, to be perfectly honest. He will still do damage to you and he will side, but he does have a glaring weakness, which is just fire. Now, of course, similar to Oshu, he is weak to Ifrit, but there's no way you get Ifrit before you fight the Sinspawn. But I guess to make it up for that, the Sinspawn isn't as strong. Like, his staccato tentacles aren't really too powerful. They don't deal too much damage. The only thing you really gotta watch out for is, I think when he spits that ball and you don't have an Aeon, you will have a bit of a hard time. So I will put him in the high C tier, definitely above the Octopus, but below Oshu. I didn't find him too difficult. Of course, having an Aeon really helped out. So, yeah. Next, we have the Blitzball Machina. This is the Machina that you take on at the Albed ship during the Albed Sykes versus Besaid Aurochs Blitzball match. His main weakness, obviously, is the crane. You use the crane to sort of get those two roller thingies on top of its head out, and you deal a crap ton of damage to him. But if you try and take him on straight up without the use of the crane, his silent, he is able to counter pretty much whatever you throw at him with the appropriate status. Like, if you hit him with an attack, he will blind you. If you hit him with a spell, he'll mute you, or he'll put you in silence. So that actually makes him a relatively hard boss. But if that crane didn't exist, but because that crane existed, I can't rate him as a difficult boss. Honestly, all you have to do is cast. I can't speak English today. All you have to do is cast haste on Kimahri, Titus, or Lulu, and you pretty much just, you know, you can just rush damage him and beat him pretty easily, especially after you use the crane. Next, we have the Chocobo Eater. The Chocobo Eater was actually a very difficult boss, especially if he has haste on him. I don't recall if this one could cast haste on himself. I think he could, like towards sort of the later half of the battle. Especially if he manages to push you off the cliff, then you're actually going to have a bit of a hard time taking him on. He's also very well armored, so you're going to have a hard time piercing that armor unless you use Armor Break from Orin. But as long as you cast haste and you pretty much just rush him with damage and you hit him with his weakness, which I think is either ice or fire, I can't quite remember, then you can beat him. But the thing is, you know, if at the time of that fight, at 10,000 health, this actually wasn't easy. It was not an easy fight. And obviously, you didn't get the help of Seymour like you did against the Sinspawn. So with the Chocobo Eater, I'll actually put him at the B tier, just slightly below Lord Oshu, but above the Sinspawn. Next, we have the Sinspawn. I think this was a collection of all the Sinspawn that the Crusaders have picked up as a way to lure Sin during Operation Mihen. He was a hard boss, actually. At the time you take him on, he's a relatively hard boss. Now, of course, I'm assuming that you don't, like, grind, like, you don't just level up your AP before you take him on. Like, let's say you just follow the storyline all the way through taking him on without, you know, doing that extra training on the side. He will actually be a hard boss. He uses those two fins. I don't know if those are fins. Those aren't hands. Those two things on the side to protect his main body, which is what you need to kill. If you don't take care of that centipede head on top, then he's going to splash you with venom, and you're going to get hit with poison, and you have to deal with it. And poison, honestly, in Final Fantasy X, poison is a pretty hard status to deal with, because it doesn't go away unless you remedy it or you antidote it. And honestly, it's just gonna give you a pretty hard time, because I think it deals like a quarter or a third of your health per hit, and that's a lot of health. You do not want that to happen. So he is actually a kind of a hard boss at the time that you take him on, but he's not too difficult. You get rid of the head, you get rid of the arms, which do regenerate, but honestly, if you can take care of those for the time being, then all you have is his head to take care of, and all he really casts is Demi. But his legs do quite a bit of damage though, so he is at the high B tier, but not as hard as... You can see sort of the line I have between the A tier and the B tier. Like, the underwater monster was super hard to take on, both at the obviously the first stage, because you don't ever beat it, and at the sort of post game, not really post game, but like, you know, the stuff you can do before you take on Sin. But yeah. Next, we have another sort of Machina similar to this one, only this is the one that Riku controls during the Moonflow fight. That one actually wasn't too difficult. It goes up, I think, for like a big machine cannon shot, but you know, if you hit it enough times, it comes down, and it just deals regular attacks, which honestly aren't all too impressive. So I'm actually gonna put him here. I actually found him relatively like easier than the Sinspawn at the time that I took it on. So Alright, next we got the Sphere. Now this one actually was not an easy boss, and the reason for that is physical attacks didn't do too much damage to it. You had to be able to predict what kind of element it was weak to. And every time you find its weakness, it's going to change. Now, of course, based on what the weakness is, like, let's say you casted water on it and it heals itself, that means its weakness is thunder. Pretty much whatever heals it, the weakness is the opposite spell. But because physical damage isn't going to be too much of an effect, it is a relatively hard boss. Not to mention, it can pretty much transform itself into like a rectangle or like into a cylinder, and it'll just slam one of your characters, and it can do quite a bit of damage. So I'm actually putting him at the high C tier. I don't think he was harder than the Chocobo Eater at the time, but you know, there's still like a puzzle element as to how you're gonna beat it. That's pretty much what made it hard. Next, we have the Cannon Machina. Now, the Cannon Machina, if you did not have Ixion, if you do not use Ixion, this is actually going to be a relatively hard fight because his weakness is Thunder, and he has sort of that scout that sort of prevents all magic from being used and Aeons being summoned. So this actually, if you weren't able to take care of the sensor, then you can't bring an Ixion to sort of do a one-hit KO. I mean, assuming you get it down to below 9999. So this actually was a very difficult boss at the time that you take it on. Is it as hard as this? Probably not, but I am gonna put this A tier just because its main weakness was pretty much covered by the sensor, whereas Sinspawn didn't really have a weakness that it covered. I mean, I guess the arms, but it wasn't as brutal as the machine. But it's obviously below this, since it's obviously below the I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. My apologies. Next, we have Seymour Guado. I think this is just regular Seymour. Yeah, I think this is just regular Seymour. So this is the Seymour you take on at Macalania Temple. Now, of course, that is including Anima as well, so we're kind of putting them in a package. Now, Seymour and Anima were also not easy. Anima's Pain can hit you really, really hard, and Seymour has sort of two stages in this fight. The first stage is when he's surrounded by Guado. The second stage is after you beat Anima. But after you beat Anima, pretty much whatever Aeon you had out is going to be insta-killed because he's just going to cast multi-spells. I think he casts multi-spell twice before he gives you a turn, but by then your Aeon is dead, which means you actually have to take care of him quickly. So he was actually a pretty difficult boss, but I actually do not think he was harder than the Machina just because you were able to use your Aeons, and Shiva could actually take care of Anima relatively quickly. But if you did it, yeah, Shiva, because, you know, I mostly wanted to use Shiva at the time because she was the newest Aeon at the time. But apart from that, like, if you put aside the Aeon, then Anima's Pain will do a big amount of damage to all the characters. Well, actually, no, Pain will kill them. Will insta-kill. So, you know, that's why he's at rank A, but he's not harder than the Machina just because, you know, your Aeon could have a okay time taking him on. Next, we have Wendigo. I don't know if the main boss is called Wendigo. I think it is. This is the one that's surrounded by two Guado. This is in Macalania Lake. The reason why I found this one kind of hard is because you didn't have Yuna. You did not have the Aeon. Wait, did you have Yuna? I can't remember now. Actually, you know, no, yeah, you did, but it didn't matter because the Guado jacked up this Wendigo so much that, like, with Berserk, with Protect, with Shell whenever they died, that no matter what you try to put up against it, it will actually kill you. This was a hard boss. I'm actually putting him ahead of Seymour because of this. At the time you take him on, the fact that he got Berserk, the fact that he got protected and shelled, and every time you put an Aeon to put in an attack on him, he'll just literally punch it to death, and, like, you're kind of stuck. So I actually found him a little bit harder than Seymour Guado, which is strange. Next, we have Evray. Evray actually wasn't too difficult of a boss, actually. Now, if it gives itself haste, then yes, it's gonna have a bit of a hard time. But as long as you sort of time the commanding of the ship to sort of come back and move forward, then it's not going to be able to use. I don't remember what the name of that move is called, but there's definitely one move that it can't do when it's too far away from the ship. So as long as you can time it, and I think it gives you sort of an indicator of when that happens. Evray wasn't too difficult of a boss. I actually don't think Evray was as hard as Sinspawn, just because you were sort of able to control that. So, and I think Evray can petrify you, but, you know, it wasn't a breakable petrify because you're not underwater, so it wasn't too difficult. Next, we have Bahamut. Now, I'm not really calling this the Bahamut fight. I'm actually calling it more of the Isaru fight. I think that's his name. Yeah, because you take on multiple Aeons, but his Bahamut was obviously the strongest. Now, all the Bahamut did really was do countdown, so he wasn't too powerful here, actually. So I'm gonna put him probably I'm probably gonna put him below the sphere, just because he wasn't too difficult. Like, his Aeons weren't too powerful. They have a lot of health, but their powers were relatively weak. So as long as you shielded and boosted appropriately, you know, you beat them relatively easily. So next, we have Evray Zombie Mode. Now, Evray Zombie Mode was actually harder than Evray itself because this can still petrify, but it's underwater, which means if it managed to petrify one of the characters, you could not recover them with a soft because they will insta-break. They're underwater. So that's going to be a problem. I actually found it harder than the Sinspawn as well, but not too much harder than Seymour. And the reason for that is because you are able to sort of swim away and sort of use the gates to your advantage, which means that his stone gates won't actually be able to get to you because I think so, at least I can't remember. But I know for a fact it wasn't too difficult once you got past the gates. So plus you could stand by and recover some health along the way because Waka, Titus, nor Riku are healers, so you kind of need all the advantages you can get. So there is that. Next we have Seymour. I don't know if this is Seymour Natus. I think this is Seymour Natus. This is the one that you take on at the Bevelle bridge. He wasn't too difficult as long as you were able to predict his spells. Now, if you casted Scan on him, you were going to be able to read what kind of spells he will cast. He definitely also has this, I don't know what to call this creature, but you know, he always absorbs health from Seymour whenever he loses all of his health. So he is also sapping away health from Seymour itself. Apart from Flare and the multi-spells, he wasn't too powerfully strong. You know, if you prepared yourself by casting Shell on your characters for the fight, then he wasn't all too difficult. I wouldn't say he's as difficult actually as Evray in the underwater, just because, you know, even if he does manage to put put a status on one of your characters, you can always heal it, whereas with the Evray you couldn't. Next, we have this creature right here. I don't remember what this is called. This is one of those big machines. I think this is one of Bevelle's weapons, but the Guaro used it, I believe. And I think you took him on after you passed the Calmlands. His Haymaker is pretty powerful, don't get me wrong. But I think he is almost at the same level of difficulty as the Wendigo, only he didn't have the statuses on him. So I actually don't find him a particularly hard boss, so I'm gonna put him right here. The only really strong thing about him is his Haymaker. His Blast Punch does exactly half the current HP, so it's not even an insta-kill. So as long as you keep up your healing and all that, then you should be fine. Plus, I don't think there were Guado helping him. I don't recall Guado helping him. I think you were just taking on the machine itself, but I could be wrong. Next, we have the Yojimbo. This is the Yojimbo that was summoned in the Cavern of the Stolen Faith before you actually obtain Yojimbo. So I think there was a summoner that Lulu used to guard, and she sort of stopped her pilgrimage, or I think she died in that cave. And yeah, so she got Yojimbo. Not too difficult, to be honest. Like, I actually find him here. I actually think this Yojimbo was easier than the Bahamut. Just, yeah, so yeah, that's why I put him. Next, we got Biran and Yenke, Kimahri's main enemies. Now, of course, the reason why you can find this fight relatively difficult is because Kimahri, you only use Kimahri for this fight. It's a 1-on-2 fight, literally. As long as you don't let them bulldoze, I think you were fine, just because their sort of base damage they were definitely like based on what Kimahri stats were. Like if Kimahri's health, for example, was like 9999 at the time of this fight, then their health is gonna be like over 10,000 or over 12,000. But if Kimahri's health was like 4,000 or 5,000, then they'll just be slightly more. So it's definitely scaled based on what Kimahri's level is. I didn't find them too difficult. Not to mention Kimahri could, you know, learn so many overdrives from them. So I'm actually gonna put them here. They're definitely a little bit harder than Yojimbo, but not as hard as the Bahamut fight, I think. So, actually, I could almost put them here. I actually think they were a little bit harder than the Bahamut fight, because again, like I said, all Bahamut ever really did was protect. Next, now this, I may argue putting this Seymour above this, because the reason why is because this Seymour, I forgot the name of this Seymour, but this thing had access to the Lance of Atrophy, which is zombie, and it was able to manipulate it using I think it was using Regen or something, or Kiraga. But it had that devastating Annihilator attack where if you let it go off, the only reason why you could avoid that was because you had Aeons, so like you could use them to tank the damage. But like if you're just straight up using your characters at the time of this fight, and I think it has 75,000 HP, so it actually wasn't too easy either. So I'm actually gonna put him here. I almost wanted to put him at S tier just because I remember having such a hard time fighting against him in my first couple of playthroughs of this game when I first played it years ago. So that was actually pretty tough, but I think I'll just put him here for the time being. Next, we have the Sanctuary Keeper. We fight the Sanctuary Keeper after we do the trials at Zanarkand. I think the only thing about him that was sort of, noteworthy was his curse, which honestly, I don't recall what it did too much, but his photon spray could potentially be devastating. So I'm actually going to put him here. I did find him a little bit harder than this Haymaker guy, but not that hard, so. Next, we have the Protector of the... I think this is like Yunalesca's guard. And it's not really the Guardian. Like, I don't mean it as the actual term, but I mean like he definitely guards the path to get to Yunalesca. I don't remember what it's called, but the main thing about him was he could cast Berserk. If he manages to cast Berserk on your spellcasters, then that could potentially be a problem because your spellcasters need to be able to heal you because he actually does do a lot of damage, and you need to position yourself on the board very carefully because if you put 3 characters adjacent to each other, then he's gonna have his AoE attack, which can do lots of damage. So he was not an easy boss fight at all, and he had a lot of HP. So I'm actually gonna put him here. I actually found him a little bit harder than Evray, just because of that Berserk status that he could inflict, and that was pretty tough. Next, we have Yunalesca. Oh, Yunalesca she's the S tier. Yunalesca is the S tier here, and we're talking about all 3 forms of Yunalesca. I know it only shows her, I think that's her 3rd form. No, that's her 2nd form. But her 3 forms were pain in the butt. Her 1st form reacted to attacks with an appropriate status, so kind of similar to the Blitzball machine, where again, a physical attack is blind, magic attack is silence, and all that stuff. And she was capable of casting zombie as well, so that's gonna be tough. And her zombie mechanics are way tougher than Seymour's. Like, she casted life, and I think when you get her to her 3rd form, I think if you have like, I think she'll cast like mega life or like auto life. Like it's life that affects all 3 characters, and if none of them have zombie, or no, I think if all of them have zombie, then they die pretty much. I think it's something like that, but I can't remember now. Actually, I know for a fact you needed, like, I think for sure for one point you needed to have a zombie like status in order to survive her devastating attack for round 3 for her 3rd stage. I just can't remember what it is, but I know for a fact that made it pretty hard because her zombie attacks, I think it was called Mega Life. I think it was Mega Life. Yeah. But yeah, it was actually really difficult because if all 3 of her characters were actually zombies, then no, she would definitely kill you. So I actually found her a very hard boss. I actually lost to her the first couple times, so I had to sort of look up what to do and all that stuff. So that's why she made it to the S tier. I just found her that difficult. Sorry if I took a while to deliberate there because it was pretty tough, because I was trying to remember her moves as well. So next we have Sin. I think the Sin didn't do much other than cast Gravija, so I feel like I can almost put him like here. He's not that hard, honestly. He had a lot of health, of course, but like, you know, your characters were already to that point where they were pretty strong. But he didn't do much of anything, to be honest. Oh wait, no, he casted Gravija, and all he did was pretty much ram the ship. He did do quite a bit of damage, but his attacks were very linear and predictable, so he wasn't too difficult in my opinion. Actually, I might put him here because I don't think he was easier than this or this. So, but he wasn't too hard. I know that for a fact. Next, we have the Sinspawn that show up at Sin's body when you take on the when you try and defeat all of his body parts, like almost his joints in a sense. You damage them and they all fall off and Sin becomes weakened. But you take these things on the way. They weren't too hard. They were barely any harder than this Sinspawn, to be honest. So it is what it is. Now we have the Sin, the time battle Sin just before you enter his body. Now this one could have actually gotten tough because it had 120,000 HP. You had to defeat it before it managed to get close to you and open its mouth all the way. And if you didn't manage to do it, then you're pretty much dead. So this actually required a bit of setup. And I actually am going to put him in the A tier because of that, because he does have a devastating attack that will instantly end the game if you don't manage to beat him early enough. I remember this did take me a couple of tries to beat him, so yeah. Next, we have Seymour's final form. I think this is Seymour Omnis. Again, you can manipulate what spells he casted, honestly, and just react accordingly. And other than that, and Dispel, he wasn't too hard of a boss. So this was a little bit of a disappointing fight, except for the fact that he had good music. So I'm going to put him here, like someone on the semi-high C tier rank. But yeah, like as long as you had spells. Then again, there were 4 of them. So like one of them was definitely getting hit hard with a 4th level spell. Actually, I'm gonna put you here. But I didn't find them harder than the Sephiroth. At least, what am I saying Sephiroth? I'm playing Final Fantasy VII too much. Too much in this. I didn't find them harder than the Sphere. I know some of you might not be happy with that, but you know what? That is my take on it. Next, we have Jet. Jet was protected by sort of 2 pagodas that could heal him. And he has a strong sword attack that could do some damage to you, so I'm actually going to put him in the high B tier. He was actually relatively difficult, but I didn't find him harder than any of these bosses, honestly. Like, he was hard, but he wasn't too hard, you know, especially if you were prepared. Next, we have... That's all I'm going to say about Yu Yevon. Yu Yevon is so weak, like, you cast Zombie on it, and then you cast Kiraga, you poison it, so it was very easy to defeat him, so I wasn't even going to do anything about this. Since Finn did nothing, only some, except for summon Sin Scale. Like, this is it's this bad when this is literally, this is farming in Final Fantasy X. You use Sin's Fin to farm. So, you're down there. This is, oh, wow, they put the first 3 bosses in the front. I found this also pretty easy, but he was definitely harder than Yu Yevon, that's for sure. And this Octopus is right in between them. Like, I didn't find him as hard as this, but he's definitely easier, or he's definitely harder than Yu Yevon. Like, come on, Yu Yevon was such a disappointment. So that's sort of my take on all of the bosses in Final Fantasy X. This is how I rank them. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, how you guys would rank these bosses. Like, you'll probably find... Like, honestly, these things could be up for debate, and I'll definitely listen if you guys have any comments on them, if you made it this far. Leave a like, of course, if you guys did enjoy this video, and let me know what other sort of things I could do ranks on, or like any other sort of video ideas. Like, because I'm going to do some, of course, for my own, but I'm saying if you guys have any additional ones, definitely let me know. And of course, subscribe for more content similar to this, and other than that, I will catch you guys in the next one.